The haunting shadows of the forgotten mansion, when the Bhoot whispers in the dead of night. Nestled in the heart of a dense, brooding forest on the outskirts of Shimla, the forgotten mansion stood like a scar from a darker time. Ivy strangled its crumbling facade, and rusted gates moaned with every breeze that passed through the valley. No one dared step inside after sunset, not even the bravest of the locals. They whispered of a Bhoot, a restless spirit that wandered the halls, whispering secrets to the shadows. Legend had it that the mansion once belonged to the Raichand family, an aristocratic bloodline known for their wealth and their curses. One stormy night, decades ago, the entire family vanished without a trace. Servants who had escaped spoke of flickering lights, distorted cries, and a woman in white who danced in the ballroom long after everyone else had gone to bed. Since then, the mansion remained untouched, as if time itself had chosen to forget it. But curiosity is a powerful curse. Anika, a young investigative journalist from Delhi, was chasing a story on haunted sites of India, dismissing the superstitions as rural exaggeration. She arrived in Shimla determined to spend a night inside the mansion, armed with only a flashlight, a recorder, and her skeptical resolve. She crossed the threshold just as the last light of day sank behind the hills. The silence inside was not the silence of emptiness, it was heavy, watchful. Her flashlight flickered as if something unseen breathed on the batteries. The air smelled of decay and incense, as if the house couldn't decide if it was a tomb or a temple. As the clock struck midnight, the real horror began. A cold whisper brushed past her ear, "Why have you come?" Anika froze. She turned, expecting a trick of the wind, but saw a shadow detach itself from the wall. It moved like smoke, trailing long fingers across the peeling wallpaper. She tried to run, but her feet betrayed her, sinking into the floorboards like quicksand. The walls began to speak. Faint voices murmured overlapping tales, accusations, betrayals, a woman weeping, a child's laughter twisted into a scream. The recorder Anika held began to rewind and play itself, but the voice on it was not hers. It spoke in a language that chilled the soul. Words ancient and furious. Return what was taken, bring back the blood. Then came the footsteps, measured, echoing through the mansion's hollow bones. The woman in white appeared, floating rather than walking, her face hidden by cascading hair. In her arms, she cradled something swaddled in rotting cloth. She looked up. Her eyes were hollow. Anika screamed. The villagers say she ran out of the mansion at dawn. Her hair turned white, her eyes empty, her voice stolen by whatever she had seen. She never spoke again. They say the mansion grows darker each year, feeding on fear, waiting for the next fool to listen to the Bhoot's whisper in the dead of night. Some doors, they say, are locked not to keep things out, but to keep things in. Would you dare to open one? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 2, The Door That Should Never Be Opened. Weeks passed after Anika's mysterious escape, but her silence spoke volumes. Word of her encounter spread quickly, through hushed village gossip, news blogs, and dark corners of the internet. Most dismissed it as urban legend, but to Arjun Mehra, a professor of parapsychology at Delhi University, it was an irresistible puzzle. Unlike Anika, Arjun wasn't chasing thrill or fame. He believed in patterns, in energy echoes, and the Roychand mansion had a pattern every 50 years. The mansion awakened. He traced the disappearances, 1925, 1975, and now, 2025. He reached Shimla just before the monsoon, armed with thermal cameras, EVP recorders, salt circles, and mantras taught by a forgotten sect of tantrics. But the villagers warned him, if you hear the whisper, do not answer, and if you find the door in the basement, do not open it, that's where the blood debt sleeps. Naturally, he went straight in. The mansion welcomed him with a low groan, as though recognizing an old friend. Unlike Anika, he didn't roam aimlessly. Arjun had studied the mansion's blueprints. He was looking for the sealed basement, mentioned only once in an old servant's diary. He found the entrance behind the grandfather clock, hidden beneath a rotting carpet. The air grew colder with each step down. The walls were lined with symbols, some Sanskrit, some in scripts far older. At the end of the passage stood a massive wooden door, bound by iron chains, each inscribed with a different warding glyph. One had been broken recently. A soft whisper slipped through the crack. "Help me." It was Anika's voice. Arjun paused. Logic said it was a mimic, a trick of the Bhoot. But emotion twisted inside him. He had once been her mentor. His hand hovered over the chains. Then, a second whisper. I remember your name, Arjun. I remember what you did in Benares. His breath caught. No one knew about Benares. No one living. The decision had been made for him. The door swung open. The basement beyond was not made of stone or brick, it was flesh. Pulsating walls oozed black ichor, and hanging from the ceiling were dozens of spirit cocoons, each glowing faintly, faces trapped within. One of them was Anika. Then came the Bhoot. It was not a ghost. It was not even human. It was rage given form. Centuries of betrayal wrapped in a charred, spectral body. It had no face, only a wide, endless mouth that whispered every sin the Ryachans ever committed. And it wanted to feed. Arjun tried the mantras. He cast the salt, but the basement was beyond redemption. The whispers turned into roars. The cocoons began to tremble. With his last breath, Arjun recorded a message and flung the recorder back through the doorway before the Bhoot devoured him whole. A week later, a team of local authorities found the mansion burned to the ground. Nothing left but ashes, except for a single, untouched recorder buried in the soil. The tape plays one thing, over and over. It wasn't just the mansion that was cursed, it was the bloodline. And it's not over. And in the wind that blows through Shimla's hills at midnight, some swear they still hear a whisper. Who's next? To be continued. Would you like part 3? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 3, Blood Ties and Burning Eyes. After the mansion's sudden destruction, Shimla returned to an uneasy quiet. But silence is never peace, it's just the pause between screams. 3 months later, in a small flat in Gurgaon, Ria Ryachand, one of the last known descendants of the Ryachand bloodline, awoke to find her mirror covered in handprints. Bloody, small, child-sized. Ria had always dismissed her family history as twisted folklore. She was a corporate lawyer, a woman of logic. Ghosts didn't belong in boardrooms, but lately, something was wrong. Her reflection lagged behind her. Lights in her flat flickered with no electrical faults, and she kept dreaming of a woman in white cradling a bundle of rotting cloth. Then the messages started. Burned into her bathroom mirror, return. Etched into her wooden desk, the debt is not paid. And one night, on her living room wall, written in her own blood, blood calls to blood. Terrified but refusing to run, Ria reached out to a friend of Arjun's, Isdyar, Ayan Mukherjee, an occult researcher who had worked in the borderlands of Assam. He arrived the next day, pale and trembling. You were never meant to be born, he told her bluntly. Your ancestors made a pact. The Ryachans traded a soul every 50 years for power and prosperity. When the last pact was broken, the Bhoot turned against them. But it can't move on until the debt is paid in full. And how do I pay it? She asked. Ayan looked at her grimly. You don't. Someone else dies for you. Or what? You go back to where it began and seal the door from the inside. That night, guided by a map retrieved from Arjun's final research, they journeyed to the ruins of the mansion. Nothing remained above ground, but beneath the scorched earth, the basement still pulsed with an unnatural life. Ria descended alone. The basement had changed. Now it was a maze of shifting corridors, each wall whispering regrets and family secrets. The cocoons were gone. In their place were mirrors, hundreds of them. Each held a version of her, weeping, screaming, laughing madly. One held her, dead. Then, at the center of the maze, she found the Bhoot. It didn't attack. It simply stood there, offering her the bundle, the child wrapped in decayed cloth, the curse itself, the sin given form. You are the last, it rasped. Take it, and the bloodline ends. Leave it, and we begin again. Ria hesitated. Then she did the unthinkable. She held the bundle. It screamed, her body convulsed. Flames erupted through the basement, walls collapsing in on themselves. She felt her soul stretch, then tear, half staying behind, half ascending. In her final moment, she whispered one word, enough. And then the mansion, what was left of it, imploded into dust. Days later, authorities found only ash, but in the middle of it all, buried under charred soil, a small silver locket lay untouched. Inside was a photo of Ria as a child, and a note written in trembling script. I paid the debt. Let them rest. Since then, the forest has grown over the land. no one speaks of the mansion anymore. But sometimes, on the windless nights, locals swear they see a woman in white at the edge of the trees, holding a bundle in her arms. Watching. Waiting. Because some curses only sleep. End of Book 1. Would you like a continuation or a spin-off story? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 4, The Seed Beneath the Ashes. Book 2, The Curse Reborn. The world thought the curse had died with Ria Rayachand. The mansion was gone, the last descendant was buried, and silence finally took root where horror once ruled. But curses don't die, they burrow. 5 years later, in a boarding school built near the ruins of the Rayachand estate, a student named Kabir Jain uncovered a strange, silver locket buried beneath a fig tree. He wasn't looking for it, it called to him. Inside was a photo of a woman he had never seen, Ria, and a name scratched on the back in ink that shimmered under moonlight, Kabir Rayachand Jain. His world shattered. Kabir was adopted. His parents never spoke of his origins, but now, the name Rayachand clung to him like cold breath on glass. That night, the dreams began. He stood in a corridor of mirrors, each reflecting versions of himself. Some were older, some younger. One bled from the eyes. One whispered in a broken voice, "Don't go back." The whispers returned, but this time, they didn't haunt a mansion. They moved with him. In the walls. In reflections. In his blood. A teacher disappeared after confiscating Kabir's locket. Another student went mad after mocking him. And then the fig tree began to bloom out of season, its flowers black as ink. Desperate, Kabir contacted a woman named Meera Shah, a freelance exorcist who had studied the Rayachand curse under Ayan Mukherjee before his mysterious death. "You weren't supposed to be born," she told him. "I know," he replied, "but I'm here, and it's awake again, isn't it?" Meera nodded. "The curse didn't die, it changed. It planted itself in your bloodline. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about rebirth. The Bhoot wants a body. You're the perfect seed." Now Kabir had a choice: run from the darkness, or descend into it and finish what his bloodline started. The old tunnels beneath the school were still there, though bricked off and forgotten. Meera and Kabir broke in. What they found wasn't a basement, it was a womb. Pulsating walls, black vines, whispering roots, and in the center, a tree made of bone and hair and teeth, cradling a cocoon shaped like a human heart. As they approached, the Bhoot emerged, not as a ghost, but as Kabir himself. "I am what your family made," it said, smiling with Kabir's face, "but you can choose what I become." Meera screamed for him to run. Kabir didn't. He stepped forward and entered the cocoon. There was no light, only memory. He saw every Rayachand sin, murders, pacts, sacrifices. He saw Ria holding the child, Arjun burning alive, the mansion watching like a god. But then he saw something new, hope. Ria's final breath had left a choice. Kabir was that choice. And he chose. The cocoon shattered. The tree died. The whispers stopped. Kabir emerged, changed, touched, but not possessed. The Bhoot was sealed, not destroyed, but bound within him, asleep, for now. He walked into the sunlight, Meera beside him, both understanding a truth no one else would believe. The mansion is gone, but the Bhoot lives within the last Rayachand. And one day, it may wake again. To be continued. Do you want to continue with Kabir's journey, or explore a different haunted legacy next? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 5, Whispers of the Living Bhoot. Book 2, The Curse Reborn. Chapter 2. Kabir Jain lived, but he wasn't alone anymore. Something inside him breathed, not with lungs, but with ancient, cursed hunger. The Bhoot was sealed within, watching through his eyes, listening through his ears. At first, it was silent, but silence, Kabir had learned, is only the Bhoot holding its breath. Then the whispers began again. They didn't come from mirrors or shadows this time. They came from himself. "She's not dead, you know." Kabir flinched. "Who?" "Ria, the one who tried to end it. She's still, somewhere." It was impossible, but the whispers didn't lie. They distorted truths, bled fear, but they never lied. Kabir and Meera returned to Delhi, where Meera's underground contacts had been collecting artifacts tied to the Rayachand curse, scraps of letters, burned symbols, and audio from Arjun's last recordings. One fragment stood out, a sequence of reversed Sanskrit that, when played backwards, whispered. Not sealed, not buried, waiting. Mira decoded it. The curse hadn't ended with Rhea. Her final act had split her soul in two, half-sacrificed, half-trapped between worlds. She's in the veil, Mira said, her voice trembling. The place between the living and the dead. If the Bhoot found her soul first, it's feeding on her. That's why it's getting stronger inside you. Kabir could feel it too. Each time he lost his temper, shadows lengthened. Each nightmare made real-world lights flicker. Once, during a panic attack, the words "flesh remembers" appeared carved into his arm, without a blade. There was only one way to free Rhea's soul, and weaken the Bhoot before it consumed him. They needed to open a gate to the veil. The ritual required three things: the ashes of the mansion, blood from a true descendant, a conduit willing to touch death without dying. Kabir had all three. They performed the ritual inside a ruinous stepwell in Rajasthan, once a sacred site of both worship and sacrifice. At midnight, the air split open like torn cloth, and Kabir stepped through. The veil was not fire and shadow. It was silence, empty cities, still air, a liminal world where time did not move and echoes had weight. Kabir wandered through spectral corridors of forgotten memory, hallways built from Rayachand's sins. Then he saw her. Rhea stood at the edge of a black river, her face gaunt, her eyes wild. She recognized him immediately. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "It wants to come with you." But it was already too late. The Bhoot emerged behind him, not as Kabir, but as a fusion of Rayachand ancestors. A monstrous, shifting patchwork of cruelty and desperation. It had followed him in, breaking the seal to claim Rhea once and for all. Kabir grabbed her hand. "We leave together," he said. The Bhoot roared. The veil cracked. In the physical world, Mira watched in horror as the stepwell began to collapse, shadows spilling from its depths. She heard Kabir scream. Then, silence. And from the broken stones of the stepwell, Kabir climbed out, dragging Rhea's unconscious body with him. He was pale, his veins dark, but his eyes were clear. The Bhoot was no longer whispering. It was waiting. Because now, there were two survivors. Two vessels. And the curse was no longer a shadow bound to a mansion. It had evolved. It walked. To be continued. Would you like the next part to dive into Rhea's recovery, or the hunt for the remaining cursed relics across India? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 6, Relics of the Blood Pact. Book 2, The Curse Reborn. Chapter 3. Rhea Rayachand was alive, but not whole. Since returning from the veil, she hadn't spoken. Her eyes scanned the world like she was still stuck between it and something else. Kabir stayed by her side, guarding her from shadows, and himself. The Bhoot wasn't gone. It pulsed inside him, no longer whispering, just listening. Mira, meanwhile, had begun to unravel the true horror behind the Rayachand curse. The mansion, the pact, the Bhoot, it was only one layer of a far older evil. Centuries ago, the Rayachands had made not one, but 7 blood pacts with an ancient entity known only as Vetrakal, the timeless one who feeds on karmic debt. Each pact was sealed with a relic, an object infused with blood, betrayal, and intent. And only 2 of those relics had been destroyed with the mansion. That left 5 more. Each one protected by curses, guardians, or worse, echoes of the original pact. If they weren't destroyed, the Bhoot would never die. Worse, it could be reborn. The first relic they tracked, a pair of gold bangles worn by Kabir's great-grandmother, locked in a defunct haveli in Lucknow, guarded by the spirit of a servant girl who died protecting it. The second, a shivling carved from obsidian, hidden in a ruined temple in the Sundarbans, where vines bled if touched and voices called to intruders in their mother's voice. The third, an unopened letter, sealed with human bone, stored in the private archives of a collector in Kolkata, who hadn't aged in over 40 years. Mira's plan was simple: find, unbind, burn. Kabir's job? Stay alive, keep the Bhoot inside him from waking, and protect Rhea, whose soul had been damaged by the veil. But things never stay simple with curses. On their second journey, to the Sundarbans temple, they were ambushed, not by ghosts, by descendants of the other pact families. Yes, the Ryachunds weren't alone. Vetricol had other clients, other bloodlines, some still loyal. They called themselves the Circle of Ash, and they didn't want the relics destroyed. "You're weakening the seal," said their leader, a woman with eyes like burning coal. "Vetricol must wake. Only then will the debt be erased for all our lines." "You're insane," Mira spat. "No," the woman replied. "We're just tired of being haunted. If we can't kill the Bhoot, we'll unleash the god." A battle followed, not of fists, but of fear, illusions, traps, whispers made real. Kabir almost gave in. The Bhoot surged forward. But then Rhea spoke her first words since returning. "You are not him." Kabir woke. The Bhoot fell back. They escaped with the relic. But now they knew, they weren't just fighting a curse. They were fighting a cult that wanted to free it. And as they stood on the temple steps, soaked in blood and rain, Kabir felt it again. A heartbeat. Not his. Deep inside. Growing stronger. For relics remain. The circle of ash grows bolder. And somewhere, in the forgotten places of the world, Vetricol begins to stir. To be continued. Would you like the next chapter to follow the next relic hunt, or a flashback into the origins of the Ryachund blood pact with Vetricol? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 7, The First Pact, Birth of the Blood Debt. Book 2, The Curse Reborn. Chapter 4, The Flashback. Before Kabir, before Rhea, before the mansion ever existed, there was Adithir Ryachund, the man who made the first blood pact. It was 1743. India trembled under Mughal decline and British rise, but in the shadows of a Himalayan village, Adithir Ryachund was rising faster than any empire. Once a mere herbalist, Adithir became a miracle man, a healer, a gold maker, a visionary. His estate grew overnight, fields multiplied, illness vanished, rivals died quietly. But those closest to him knew the truth: he had not become great through knowledge or courage. He had called something ancient. And it had answered. The night of the pact, Adithir stood in a circle drawn with menstrual blood, bone powder, and peepal ash. He had read the forbidden text he stole from a tantric cult. He knew what would happen. He only had to say the name once. Vetricol. The fire died. The shadows moved backward, and the god came, not with thunder, but in stillness, in silence so perfect, it made Adithir weep. It had no form, only eyes, dozens, spiraling in empty air, watching him with both pity and hunger. "I offer what is mine," Adithir whispered. "You have nothing," it answered, "but I will take your name." The pact was struck. Adithir offered his name, his lineage, his future blood, in exchange for power that would never fade. But Vetricol made one final demand. Every 50 years, one descendant must return to the place of the pact and offer a life. If they failed, the god would collect all debts at once. Adithir agreed. Of course he did. Power makes promises it never plans to keep. Over generations, the Ryachunds tried to manage the curse. Some kept the pact, others ran. Some, like Rhea, tried to end it. But each act of rebellion only fed the Bhoot, the wrathful shadow Vetricol had planted in Adithir's blood. And now, centuries later, Kabir Ryachund carried it. He wasn't just haunted. He was descended from the man who invited the darkness in. Back in the present, Kabir woke in a cold sweat. He had seen the first pact in a dream, but it felt more like a memory. He even remembered the circle's smell, the whisper of Vetricol. The Bhoot laughed inside him, not cruelly, not mockingly, but like someone waiting for their turn again. He turned to Mira and said, "We were never cursed." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "We were chosen to carry him." There was silence. Then Rhea stood, stronger than she had been in weeks, and said, "Then we finish what Adithir started. We destroy the final relics, and then we kill the god." But gods do not die easily, especially not ones made of debt, shadow, and willing sacrifice. To be continued. Would you like to explore the Circle of Ash's origin next, or return to Kabir, Rhea, and Mira's journey to find the fourth relic? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 8, Ashes of the Circle. Book 2, The Curse Reborn. Chapter 5, Into the Cult. While Kabir and Rhea prepared to hunt the next relic, Mira turned her attention to the looming threat. The Circle of Ash. A secretive cult, scattered across India and Nepal, composed of families who, like the Ryachuns, once bargained with Vetrikal. Some fulfilled their pacts, others reneged, but all now lived under one shared truth. If the god wakes, their debt is cleared. If the relics are destroyed, they are doomed. Meera traveled to Varanasi, following a lead on one of the circle's splinter groups hiding in the ruins of an abandoned crematorium. There, she met Agara, a defector from the circle, face scarred, eyes blind from ritual fire. They are preparing for the final convergence, he whispered, a ceremony to summon Vetrikal directly into flesh. How soon? Meera asked. Before the next blood moon, and they've already chosen the vessel. She froze. Who? Agara's voice trembled. Kabir. The circle had been tracking Kabir ever since the Bhoot entered him. He wasn't just a carrier, he was a key. The line of Adithya Raichand, the original pact maker, had become the perfect host. But the circle needed more than blood. They needed the fourth relic, an iron tongue bell hidden in a monastery in Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh, said to have been forged from the melted shackles of Raichand's first sacrifice. It could awaken the god's voice, the final stage of possession. Meera raced back to Delhi. Kabir and Riya were already gone. They were heading for Tawang. Into the circle's trap. Tawang was ice and silence. Snow covered centuries of secrets. The monastery sat like a tomb on the cliffs, wind howling like an omen. Kabir, Riya, and a monk guide named Sonam reached it at dusk. Inside the bell chamber, the air was wrong, heavy, sickly sweet. Then they saw it, hanging from a wooden arch. A small, blackened bell, with etchings in a forgotten dialect. Each chime, even silent, pressed against their skulls like nails of thought. Riya reached out, but the floor beneath them collapsed. They fell into the dark. When they awoke, torches lit the cave walls, hooded figures surrounded them. The Circle of Ash. Their leader stepped forward, the woman with coal-burned eyes, revealed at last as Nayani Bose, a direct descendant of one of the 7 pact families. Her voice echoed with something ancient. You brought the relic to us, as expected. Kabir tried to rise, but his limbs failed him. The Bhoot inside you fights, she said, but the god calls louder. She raised the iron tongue bell. Tonight, we give him your body. But as she struck the bell, something unexpected happened? Riya screamed. And shadows poured from her mouth. Not the Bhoot, not Vetrikal. Something else. Back in the monastery above, Meera arrived too late to stop the ritual, but just in time to hear the bell shatter. The mountain shook. And below, in the circle's underground altar, both Kabir and Riya glowed, their bloodlines converging into one surge of ancestral power. The Bhoot was no longer dormant. It was awake. And angry. To be continued. Would you like the next chapter to explore the fallout of the ritual, or reveal what ancient force Riya is now carrying inside her? The Haunting Shadows of the Forgotten Mansion, Part 9, The Twin Hauntings. Book 2, The Curse Reborn. Chapter 6, Bloodlines Awaken. When the bell shattered, something inside both Kabir and Riya broke. But not like glass. Like a dam. Riya was the first to scream. Not from fear, from remembering. The shadows that poured from her were not Vetrikal's. They were older, more primal, a buried force that had slumbered in her soul ever since she escaped the veil. She collapsed, convulsing. Around her, the Circle of Ash screamed as spectral hands clawed from the stone floor and dragged them into nothingness, silent, unseen, final. Kabir rose to his knees, gasping. The Bhoot was awake, but confused, its will split, its hunger unfocused. Something inside Riya had challenged it. And worse, it had touched Vetrikal in the veil. Riya opened her eyes. They weren't hers anymore. Above ground, Meera found the monastery in ruins. Snow had turned black from the curse's fallout. When she reached the altar chamber, she stopped dead. Everyone was gone. Only Kabir and Riya remained, surrounded by a circle of ash and eyes. Not human eyes. Eyes drawn in blood, blinking from the walls. Later, when they finally escaped the mountains, Riya explained through trembling lips. There was another, in the veil, not Vetrikal, a mirror, a reflection of him, made from what he could never control, sacrifice unwillingly given. Kabir didn't understand, but Mira did. You're saying, there's a second entity? Ria nodded. Yes. And it woke up in me. It's not evil. It's not good. It's what's left when people fight back against gods. They called it Shari, the reverse echo. And now, Ria was its vessel. The world began to change after that. A museum in Mumbai reported all 7 of its Raichand-related artifacts spontaneously combusting at midnight. A blind priest in Pushkar awoke screaming in tongues, saying, "The name has been split." And deep in the salt marshes of Gujarat, the last known packed relic began to ring, without anyone touching it. 5 relics down, 1 remains. The final relic is the original vow scroll, handwritten by Aditya Raichand, signed in blood and sealed in obsidian, locked away beneath the Raichand family's ancestral summer palace, now flooded and half buried off the Konkan coast. To destroy it would mean severing the original pact, and possibly killing both the Bhoot and Vetrakal forever. But Mira hesitated. If the relic was the source, destroying it might also destroy Kabir. And Ria, now host to Shari, was no longer predictable. She had dreams of burning eyes and falling stars. She spoke in riddles. And one night, she told Kabir, "The mansion didn't burn down, it moved. It's inside us now, every room, every scream. We don't haunt it anymore, Kabir. We are the mansion." Now, with time running out before the final convergence, the trio must journey to the drowned palace, facing the wrath of the sea, the circle's final believers, and Vetrakal itself, whose true form waits beneath the waves. Because in the next moonrise, one will die, one will become God, one will disappear. To be concluded. Shall I begin the final chapter, the drowned pact?